Have you ever noticed how heavy life feels when you keep trying to explain yourself to people who are not even trying to understand you? I want to take you back to a simple moment. A young boy once tried to prove himself to everyone around him. Why he spoke the way he did, why he chose what he chose, why he dreamed the way he dreamed. And every time he explained himself, he felt smaller, quieter, more confused about who he really was. Maybe you know that feeling when you try to defend your choices, when you try to justify your joy, when you try to convince someone that your heart is in the right place, even when they have already made up their mind. It hurts, doesn't it? It drains your peace. It steals your sleep. It makes you question your own truth, just because someone else cannot see it. But here's the surprising part. The world becomes lighter, almost peaceful. The moment you stop running after approval. The moment you stop explaining your every move. The moment you finally say, "This is my life and I choose to live it." And that is where real peace begins. Today, I want to take you on a journey into that peace. A peace that starts the day you stop explaining yourself by following these 7 important tips. The first key tip is about understanding that you don't owe everyone access to your heart, and this truth is heavier than most people realize. Many of us spend years stretching ourselves thin, trying to be available to everyone, responding to every message, explaining every decision, and meeting expectations that drain us more than they grow us. We forget that our emotional energy is limited, and the people who demand the most from us are often the ones who give the least in return. When you finally recognize that not everyone deserves front, raw access to your feelings, your thoughts, or your life, you begin to breathe differently. You stop apologizing for protecting your space. You stop feeling guilty for choosing yourself. And for the first time in a long time, your heart feels safe inside your own hands, instead of scattered in everyone else's opinions. There comes a point when you realize that some people don't want to understand you. They only want to use you. They value your availability more than your well-being. They expect your kindness on demand, your time without question, and your emotional openness without offering trust in return. When you give such people too much access, they learn to treat your heart like a faucet, turning it on when they need support, turning it off the moment you need something back. But once you pull back and protect your emotional doorway, you start noticing who cared about you and who only cared about what they got from you. The shift is painful at first, but it clears out the people who were blocking your peace without you even realizing it. Protecting your heart doesn't make you cold, it makes you wise. It means you've learned the difference between being kind and being controlled, between being generous and being used. You start setting boundaries not out of anger, but out of clarity. You say no without submitting a long explanation. You decline invitations that drain you. You walk away from conversations that pull you back into old patterns. And with every small act of protection, you build emotional strength. You realize your heart doesn't have to be open for everyone to walk through. It can be guarded without being closed, strong without being hard, warm without being unprotected. And something beautiful happens when you protect your heart. You begin to see your own worth in ways you never did before. You stop measuring yourself by how much you can give away. You stop defining your value by how well you can keep others satisfied. You start honoring the truth that your emotions, your time, and your inner world are priceless. Not everyone deserves to know your struggles. Not everyone deserves to hear your dreams. Not everyone deserves a seat in the inner circle of your life. And the moment you understand this, your relationships shift. They become intentional instead of automatic, selective instead of reactive, healthy instead of draining. There will always be people who want access to your heart without earning your trust. They want to know your business not because they care, but because they're curious. They want your energy not because they value you, but because you make them feel stronger while weakening yourself. This is why protecting your heart becomes an essential act of self-respect. When you close the door to those who take more than they give, your mind clears up, your life opens up, your peace expands. You learn to recognize emotional takers long before they get close enough to damage your spirit again. And in time, you discover that protecting your heart doesn't push the right people away. It actually brings them closer. The people who truly value you won't demand explanations for your boundaries. They won't guilt trip you for taking care of yourself. They won't expect unlimited access to your emotions. They will meet you with respect, with patience, with understanding. And when you finally surround yourself with such people, you wonder why you ever allowed your heart to be handled so carelessly before. The second key tip is about understanding that explanations don't change people, actions do. And this lesson becomes clear the moment you realize how many times you've tried to convince someone of your intentions only to end up exhausted. You can speak with clarity, honesty, and a heart full of sincerity. But if a person has already decided how they want to see you, your words become noise to their closed mindset. It's like pouring truth into a cup that has a hole at the bottom. No matter how much you offer, nothing stays. When people are determined to misunderstand you, they will twist your words, question your motives, and hear only what fits their narrative. And in those moments, explaining yourself becomes a cycle that drains your confidence piece by piece. You start to realize that your peace isn't lost because people don't understand you. Your peace is lost because you keep trying to make them. When you rely on explanations to fix relationships or convince people to respect your choices, you put your emotional power into their hands. You end up waiting for approval, waiting for validation, waiting for them to say, "Okay, now I get it." But some people will never say those words, not because you're unclear, but because they benefit from misunderstanding you. They stay in control as long as you feel obligated to justify yourself. This is why actions become the real language of truth. When you stop over-explaining and start living in alignment with your values, you break the cycle. You stop trying to change the minds of those who have no intention of seeing you for who you are. You allow your life to speak on your behalf, and that is when your strength becomes undeniable. There is a deep sense of freedom in choosing to let your actions walk ahead of your explanations. Actions require no approval, no debate, no back and forth. They stand firm even when opinions waver. People may question your choices, but when your life shows consistency, discipline, and integrity, explanations become unnecessary. Over time, people begin to notice the changes they once doubted. They notice how you stayed committed even when they didn't believe in you. They notice how you grew even when they dismissed you. And suddenly, the same people who once demanded explanations find themselves confronted with results they can't ignore. Results silence judgments that arguments never could. You also start to attract a different kind of person when you stop explaining everything. You attract people who value consistency over promises, people who respect effort over excuses, people who watch your actions before they jump to conclusions. These are the people who don't make you feel like you're on trial every time you make a decision. They don't force you to defend your choices. Instead, they observe your behavior, understand your character, and trust your direction. Your life becomes less about convincing others and more about aligning with those who naturally get it, because they see how you move, not how you justify yourself. And then there's the truth we often avoid. Sometimes we over-explain because we're afraid of being seen as selfish or misunderstood. We feel the need to defend every choice because we think silence will make people assume the worst. But here's the reality. People who want to misunderstand you will misunderstand you even if you write a 3-page explanation. Their assumptions aren't based on your truth. They're based on their fears, their insecurities, their expectations. Once you understand that, you stop wasting emotional energy on convincing people who aren't even listening. You stop apologizing for decisions made from a place of growth. You stop shrinking your voice to soothe someone else's discomfort. And with time, your life becomes much quieter. But in the best way, the noise of needing to be understood fades. The stress of proving yourself disappears. You begin to trust that the right people will see you clearly, even when you speak less, and the wrong people will misinterpret you, even when you explain everything. So you choose the wiser path. You choose to let your actions build the story of your life, while your peace stays intact. The third key tip is about realizing that your life is not a debate stage. And this understanding can completely shift the way you move through the world. So often, people step into your life expecting you to defend every decision like you're standing behind a podium facing a panel of critics. They question your goals, your choices, your boundaries, and even your happiness, as if your life requires their permission. When you feel pressured to respond to every doubt or judgment, your life starts to feel like an endless argument, one you never asked to be part of. But the truth is, you were never meant to live like that. Your purpose isn't up for public discussion. Your dreams were not created for group approval. The moment you understand this, you stop engaging in debates that drain your spirit and begin valuing your inner peace over external validation. People will always have opinions, and many of those opinions appear loud only because you've been conditioned to listen. You may have grown up around voices that demanded explanations or dishonored your choices, so you learned to over-explain as a survival tactic. But adulthood asks you to unlearn that habit. You don't need to justify why you left a job, why you cut ties with someone toxic, why you're pursuing a dream others find unrealistic, or why your priorities have shifted. Not everyone will see the vision you see. Not everyone was meant to walk the path you're walking. And that's okay. Your life isn't a project to be presented. It's a journey to be lived. When you stop treating every decision like a courtroom statement, you reclaim the mental freedom you didn't even realize you lost. Debating your life decisions with people who don't share your values is one of the fastest ways to lose confidence. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you shrink your dreams. And it makes you believe that your path requires crowd approval before you take the next step. But your mission in life isn't a group assignment, it's a personal calling. Every time you respond to criticism that doesn't come from love or wisdom, you reinforce the idea that someone else's perspective is more important than your intuition. And when you let that belief grow, you slowly hand over the steering wheel of your life. You begin to live for acceptance instead of alignment. You start to perform instead of live. Breaking this cycle begins the moment you decide that your energy is too valuable to waste on debates that lead nowhere. When you stop debating your life, something powerful happens, your clarity increases. You finally have space to hear your own voice, not the noise around you. You start focusing on what actually matters: your growth, your peace, your purpose. You become more intentional with your decisions because you're no longer trying to please the crowd. You begin trusting your instincts again. You learn to pause before responding and ask yourself, does this conversation even deserve my energy? Most of the time, the answer is no. People who constantly challenge your choices are often projecting their fears, their insecurities, or their limitations onto you. Their doubts come from their world, not yours. And then there's the reality many people don't like to admit. Some individuals question your decisions not because they care, but because they're uncomfortable with your growth. When you change, it exposes the part of them that refuses to grow. When you rise, it reminds them of the places they stayed stuck. So they challenge you, not to understand you, but to slow you down. If you engage in every debate, you fall right into their trap. The moment you refuse to argue, you take back the power they hope to keep. Your silence becomes a boundary. Your confidence becomes your explanation, and your progress becomes the only proof you ever need. Over time, you begin to notice something beautiful. The less you argue, the more aligned your life becomes. You surround yourself with people who don't question your worthiness, who don't demand justifications, who don't expect you to convince them of your dreams. You attract people who recognize your direction without needing a speech from you. And in that environment, your growth becomes natural. Your decisions become lighter. And your life stops feeling like a stage where you're constantly performing for an audience. It becomes what it was always meant to be: your own sacred path, guided by your truth, strengthened by your silence, and protected from the noise of unnecessary debates. The fourth key tip is about understanding that silence is a superpower, not a weakness. And this truth becomes clearer the moment you realize how much peace you lose by responding to every comment, every insult, every doubt, every unnecessary conversation that pulls you into emotional chaos. Silence is not the absence of strength, it is the presence of control. It is the ability to choose your battles instead of reacting to everything that demands your attention. In a world where noise is constant and everyone has an opinion, silence becomes a rare kind of wisdom. It protects your energy, shields your mind, and keeps you focused on what actually matters. When you learn to stay silent in the moments that once provoked you, you experience a different kind of power, one that doesn't shout but stands firm. Silence becomes powerful when you stop using it as avoidance and start using it as alignment. There are moments when speaking drains you more than staying quiet. There are people who don't want understanding. They want control. They want chaos. They want a reaction that confirms their assumptions. When you choose silence over responding, you're not giving up. You're refusing to hand over your emotional steering wheel. Silence says, I don't need to win this argument. I don't need to prove anything. I don't need to match your energy. Silence ends conversations that were designed to exhaust you, not elevate you. And the moment you see silence as a choice, not a surrender, you begin to value it, the fortress it truly is. The world often teaches you that speaking up equals strength. But true strength is knowing when not to speak. It's knowing that your time, your energy, and your inner peace are worth more than any argument. Silence helps you rise above the noise. It allows you to observe people's intentions instead of being pulled into their emotions. It gives you space to think before reacting, to understand before responding. In silence, you see the truth behind people's words, their insecurities, their fears, their motives. And once you see that clearly, you stop taking things personally. You stop being controlled by your triggers. You stop letting emotions lead you into places that don't serve your growth. What most people don't realize is that silence often reveals more about you than your words do. People watch how you react when you're challenged, ignored, criticized, or misunderstood. Your silence teaches them that you are grounded, not easily shaken, not easily manipulated. It sends a message that you will not engage in pointless drama or emotional tug-of wars. It shows maturity, discipline, and self-respect. And ironically, the more you stay silent, the louder your presence becomes. People begin to understand that you speak with intention, not impulse. They learn that your voice is meaningful because you don't use it carelessly. There will be moments in life when silence feels uncomfortable, like you're letting someone win or letting something slide. But silence is never about letting others win. It's about letting yourself stay whole. Every unnecessary argument you avoid, every emotional reaction you don't feed, every conflict you walk away from is not a loss. It's a strategic victory for your inner peace. Silence keeps your mind clear. It keeps your heart calm. It keeps your spirit focused on what actually matters. And when you realize how much of your peace was lost through unnecessary explanations, you start choosing silence not out of fear, but out of freedom. In time, you begin to understand that silence is not emptiness, it is space. Space to think, space to heal, space to decide what truly deserves your voice and what does not. Silence helps you conserve your strength for the battles that matter, not the ones that distract you. It shifts your energy from reacting to creating, from defending to building, from proving to becoming. And once you embrace silence as a superpower, you no longer feel pressured to speak just because someone expects you to. Your words become rare but impactful. Your presence becomes grounded, and your peace becomes unshakable. The fifth key tip is about realizing that when you explain less, you live more. And this truth hits hardest when you finally understand how much of your life has been spent defending your choices instead of actually experiencing them. Every minute wasted in justification is a minute pulled away from growth, joy, healing, and progress. You don't even notice how heavy the burden becomes until you put it down. You move through life feeling drained without knowing why, not realizing it's the constant pressure to make others comfortable with your decisions that steals your energy. When you stop explaining every detail of your life, you give yourself permission to start living it fully. Without guilt, without hesitation, without waiting for approval. You begin to realize that your life moves forward the moment you stop narrating it for others. There's a certain kind of freedom that arrives when you choose to use your time to build your future instead of defending your past. You stop rewriting explanations in your head. You stop anticipating people's reactions. You stop planning what to say when someone questions your choices. All of that mental space becomes available again, and suddenly you have room to think, breathe, imagine, and create. The energy you once used to convince others transforms into the energy you now use to elevate yourself. You start focusing on your goals with clarity you didn't know you were missing. And as you shift your attention from explaining to becoming, your life silently begins to take a different shape. One that feels lighter, smoother, and more aligned with your spirit. Living more also means embracing the idea that your choices don't have to make sense to anyone else. They only need to make sense to you. People often expect explanations because they view your life through the lens of their own fears and limitations. If a decision scares them, they assume it should scare you. If they wouldn't take a risk, they assume you shouldn't either. If your growth makes them uncomfortable, they try to pull you back into familiar patterns. But when you stop explaining yourself, you step out of their emotional shadows. You begin to make decisions guided by your intuition, not by their expectations. And the more you trust yourself, the more your life aligns with what you actually want, not what others think you should want. One of the most powerful transformations happens when you stop seeking validation and start embracing presence. You begin to notice the small moments you used to rush through while preparing defenses in your mind. You notice the calm in your mornings, the clarity in your thoughts, the strength in your choices. You start valuing experiences over arguments, progress over approval, happiness over explanation. Life becomes richer because you're finally living inside it, not outside it trying to explain it. This presence brings a deep sense of peace that explanations could never provide. It reminds you that your journey is meant to be felt, not justified. And then comes a surprising shift. You begin to enjoy your life more. You take risks without announcing them. You make changes without apologizing for them. You pursue dreams without asking if they're reasonable. You start to live boldly, quietly, intentionally. You stop editing your desires to fit other people's comfort zones. And with every act of silent confidence, you become more of who you were always meant to be. You realize how much joy was waiting on the other side of letting go of explanations. As you step deeper into this way of living, you understand that life moves faster, smoother, and more beautifully when you're not constantly stopping to explain yourself. You begin to pour your time into things that nourish you instead of arguments that drain you. You become more selective with your conversations, more protective of your energy, and more focused on your mission. And with each passing day, you discover that when you explain less, not only do you live more, but you live better, clearer, freer, and with a strength that doesn't need words to be understood. The sixth key tip is about understanding that people judge what they don't understand, and that's not your problem. And this truth becomes liberating once you stop taking other people's confusion as your responsibility. The world is full of people who see you through the lens of their own fears, limits, and insecurities. When they can't understand your choices, they label them. When they can't figure out your growth, they question it. When they can't match your courage, they criticize it. But their judgment is never really about you. It's about the uncomfortable mirror your life holds up to their own. The moment you recognize that misunderstanding doesn't equal wrongdoing, you free yourself from the constant weight of being misread. You stop trying to shrink yourself to fit the size of their understanding. People judge when they lack context. They see your results, not your sacrifices. They see the confidence, not the battles you fought to earn it. They see the change, not the nights you cried for it. They see your detachment, not the pain that forced you to detach. And because they only witness the surface, they create their own version of your story. They fill the blanks with assumptions, and assumptions become judgments. Instead of wasting your breath correcting their narratives, you learn to accept that some people don't want understanding. They want simplicity. They want to label you quickly, so they don't have to think deeply. Their inability to understand your journey is not a reflection of your clarity, it's a reflection of their limitation. The moment you stop trying to control how others see you, you reclaim emotional freedom. You begin to understand that people's opinions are filtered through their upbringing, mindset, wounds, and worldview. Someone raised in fear will judge boldness. Someone who never healed will judge emotional boundaries. Someone who never took risks will judge ambition. Someone who is threatened by change will judge transformation. Their judgment is a window into them, not a definition of you. And when you internalize this truth, judgment loses its power over your decisions. You stop carrying the emotional weight of trying to correct misunderstandings that were never meant to understand you in the first place. What's even more eye-opening is that people often judge you because your life exposes something they haven't confronted in theirs. Your discipline highlights their inconsistency. Your growth highlights their stagnation. Your peace highlights their chaos. Your confidence highlights their insecurity. Instead of looking inward, they project outward. They judge the part of you that challenges the comfort zone they refuse to leave. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake their discomfort for your mistake. But when you stay true to your path, even while being judged, you develop a resilience that explanations can't give you. You learn to stand tall even when misunderstood. Over time, you begin to see that judgment is often the price of evolution. The more you grow, the less predictable you become. The less predictable you become, the more difficult it becomes for others to mentally categorize you. People feel safer when they can explain someone. When they can't place you neatly into a familiar box, they create stories to make sense of you. But you were never meant to fit into someone else's box. Your growth is supposed to confuse those who refuse to grow. Your healing is supposed to disrupt those who benefit from your brokenness. And your boundaries are supposed to upset those who were comfortable crossing them. Their judgment is proof that you're moving. Eventually, you reach a point where judgment doesn't even sting anymore. It becomes background noise to the life you're building. You focus on your vision instead of their opinions. You invest in your peace instead of their approval. You choose alignment over acceptance. And as you walk your path with quiet confidence, you realize something powerful. People don't need to understand your journey for it to be valid. They don't need to agree with your choices for them to be right for you. Their judgment has no authority over your purpose. And the moment you embrace that truth, you stop shrinking, you stop explaining, and you start living fully, unapologetically, deeply, and freely. The seventh key tip is peace comes from alignment, not approval. When a woman learns to build her life around what aligns with her values, her inner truth, and her quiet intuition, she stops chasing validation from the outside world. Alignment means you are no longer bending yourself into shapes that make others comfortable. It means you choose what feels right in your spirit, not what looks right to others. This shift is powerful because it frees your mind from the exhausting cycle of pleasing people who often don't even know what they want themselves. When you finally realize that peace is an internal decision, not an external reward, you start walking differently, calmer, clearer, and more certain of who you are becoming. As she grows stronger, she understands that seeking approval is one of the fastest ways to lose herself. Approval requires performance, but alignment requires honesty. Approval pushes you to adapt to the expectations of others, while alignment asks you to return home to your own voice. When a woman stops apologizing for her needs, her standards, and her boundaries, She steps into a version of herself that is grounded and emotionally self-sufficient. She begins to see that the people who truly care about her will respect her alignment even when it doesn't perfectly match their preferences. That realization alone softens the internal pressure she used to carry. She also learns that alignment brings a deep kind of peace that approval can never offer. Approval is temporary, it fades the moment someone's mood changes. But when a woman is aligned with her values, her peace becomes stable and self-generated. It is not dependent on praise, attention, or permission. She finds that she can walk away from conversations that disturb her peace, decline opportunities that don't feel aligned, and choose environments that nourish her growth. Each aligned decision reinforces her inner stability, making her less reactive to external noise. There is also a quiet strength that grows when a woman chooses alignment over approval. It changes how she speaks, how she moves, and how she makes decisions. She no longer rushes to justify herself or explain her choices. She no longer feels guilty for saying no. This strength doesn't make her harsh, it makes her centered. She becomes someone who can listen without absorbing, observe without reacting, and stand firm without being defensive. Alignment gives her an inner backbone that approval could never build. Over time, she starts to notice how people treat her differently. Those who once took advantage of her people-pleasing tendencies slowly fall away because they can no longer manipulate her through guilt or fear. Meanwhile, those who value her authenticity are drawn closer. Alignment naturally filters her environment. It attracts relationships with genuine depth and removes those built on convenience or superficial admiration. Instead of being drained by interactions, she finds herself energized by the people who respect her boundaries and support her growth. And perhaps the most beautiful part is the freedom she feels. When she stops living for applause, she finally has the space to hear her own heartbeat again. She reconnects with passions she once buried. She makes choices that reflect who she truly is rather than who she felt pressured to be. She realizes that peace isn't something she has to chase. It's something she uncovers when she stops abandoning herself. Alignment becomes her compass, her protection, and her quiet source of confidence. When a woman finally understands that alignment is her true path to peace, she stops living life on the surface and starts living it from the soul. She no longer measures her worth by how others see her, but by how deeply she honors her own truth. And that is where her real power rises. Because a woman rooted in alignment is unshakable. She becomes the kind of woman who moves with purpose, chooses with clarity, and loves herself without conditions. She becomes her own safe place, her own guide, her own source of peace. And from that place, she doesn't just survive, she thrives, she inspires, and she becomes a living reminder to every woman watching that true strength begins the moment you decide to stop seeking approval and start choosing yourself.